Donald Trump has announced a new round of tariffs, not against China this time. Now it's going to be against Mexico. And there is a very real chance, I want you to bear in mind, that all of this is designed to distract you from what Robert Mueller revealed earlier this week, but that's where we're at as a country. So let's talk about these tariffs and what effect they could possibly have on the US economy and US workers. He initially tweeted, on June 10th, the United States will impose a 5% tariff on all goods coming into our country from Mexico until such time as illegal migrants coming through Mexico and into our capital country stop. The tariff, again capitalized, will gradually increase until the illegal immigration problem is remedied. So that seems reasonable. He'll just do the tariff until there's no undocumented immigration. We should get this wrapped up by mid next month. So
no, not mid next month. Before June 10th. So we've got about 10 days.
Ideally before then, yeah. So if we could crank it out, that'd be good. So that's 5%. In a presidential statement that followed, he said that tariffs would be raised to 10% on July 1st if the crisis persists, and then by an additional 5% each month for 3 months. It would remain at 25% until Mexico acted, he said. Now, bear in mind, I don't think that a lot of Americans necessarily think about the trading relationship between the United States and Mexico, but it's a pretty significant and important one for our country as well as Mexico. Mexico is Washington's largest trading partner, sending across the border items like tomatoes, cars, and rugs. Mexico sent the United States $346.5 billion of goods last year, meaning that a 5% tariffs on those products would amount to a tax increase of more than $17 billion. Most of those costs would then be passed on to businesses and consumers. That, for whatever reason, always gets left out of these conversations, but that tariff is not a tax on Mexico, it is a tax on me and Cenk and Jayar and you.
Well, don't encourage him. If you put it that way, he'll like it. So yes, Donald Trump to this day does not understand that concept. He keeps saying that China and now Mexico will have to pay the tariffs. That is literally not how they work. The companies that are getting those goods are the ones that pay them, American companies. So last night, this story broke right after the first 2 hours of the show. So on the third hour, I gave you a quick summary of it, and then I gave you my least bold prediction of all time, that the market would crash today, and of course it did. So GM stock collapsed. They're like, we make all our cars in Mexico. So now we have a giant tariff that we have to pay, so we're gonna make less money. Of course the value of our stock's gonna go down. And so, look, there's one of two ways that this goes. Trump digs in and goes, nope, I'm not moving, I don't care what happens. And the market goes down and down and down. And then, by the way, in the midst of that, what will happen is Nancy Pelosi will all of a sudden find her backbone. Because all of a sudden the donors will call her up, impeach, go ahead and impeach right now. So if he really keeps going by July, not July, no way, June 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, some in that window somewhere, Pelosi will be like, yeah, impeach, I got the call from the donors. Now she'll never say that. Okay, it depends on how much the market crashes. Or at some point, everybody will pull Trump aside and go, look, we told you not to do this. You said it wouldn't be a problem. The markets are bleeding out. And markets are like ratings, Donald. You don't want your ratings to go down. Oh, wait a minute. Now remember, he backpedals all the time. He earlier said he was gonna close the border completely. And the markets were like, right? And he's like, yeah, I didn't mean it. I don't want my, I don't want my ratings to go down. So we'll see if he actually means it. And by the way, and I went on CNBC, not a place I normally go, and I think that their economic point of view is very conservative, but it is interesting to see how they are reacting to it. And they had an article about whether the markets ever believe anything Trump says, because he's so unreliable, and at least businessmen have enough sense to know that he is a pathological liar. So they're like, we're gonna have to see. We'll believe it when we see it, but they've begun to believe it.
Yeah, when it comes to people's money, they understand what's happening. If we understand it, they understand it. It's a pattern and we know how it works. As you point out, you alluded to already, Cenk, this is something he'll backpedal on, or at least, as we already know, a lot of times when you're gonna throw out some trade wars with another country, that first off, you're trying to set up some kind of trading partnership with all of North America, which is similar to NAFTA, but completely different than NAFTA, because NAFTA was a disaster until NAFTA wasn't a disaster until I called it something else, and it's mostly NAFTA anyway. Anyway, totally. So with that pattern, usually these types of things happen if it's a trading violation other countries have. When it's not, there's gonna be battles in court, which he wouldn't necessarily know because he loses those, but people around him would know, and like, fine, you can say this nonsense, we'll move on past it, and people will forget. But the red meat on Friday that you threw out there, at least Thursday night you threw out there to your supporters, that sticks to their rib cage, and they remember that you still hate immigrants.
Yeah. And so let's talk about how significant this could be. You alluded to obviously some of the car companies very worried about this. I saw one estimate that GM could lose $6.3 billion, Ford $3.3 billion just as a result of this change. And again, like, it's not like Mexico has to cut us a check for the tariffs. The prices are higher. Presumably people might buy less stuff abroad. That's one of the supposed effects of this that goes into making them. But if you do, you'll just be paying more, and let's talk then about what you might be paying. So passing the costs on to consumers would raise the price of vehicles roughly $2,400 for GM, $2,200 for FCA, and $1,600 for Ford, according to Deutsche Bank. Factoring in foreign brands, the average consumer price increase is calculated at $1,300 per vehicle. So oddly, with his America First policy, you're paying more no matter what, but if it's an American car, you're definitely paying a lot more. And obviously, if the whole car is being manufactured there, put together there, and then shipped back, you're gonna pay on that. But Mexico produces tons of the parts that go into products that are manufactured in the US. And so even if the plant for the final product is not in Mexico, you might still end up paying more just because the parts needed to make it come from Mexico.
There's American plants in other countries?
Exactly, it turns out. And so yeah, it's gonna cost the businesses a lot of money. It's gonna cost you a lot of money for the products that you still wanna get out of Mexico.
So I think one more thing here that's important is the lack of planning. So if he was gonna go do this, and Steve Bannon comes out of the woodworks and he was calling Donald Trump a scumbag the other day, but now he loves this for the reasons that Jayar laid out. He's like, oh, he's back to being against Mexicans. I don't care what the damage is, who cares? Bannon says now he dropped the hammer and the ratcheting up to 25% will get their attention. It'll also get our attention because we're the ones paying it. Okay, anyway, but there's no planning. So if you're gonna go down this path, and if I was advising the president, I'd say, let's think about how long we're gonna dig in, how much pain we're willing to tolerate. Are we going to let the markets go down to X number or even lower than that? And what's our plan B if it gets to be too painful? Now there's a couple of different reasons. I keep talking about the markets, and if you're wondering why, look, it mainly does not affect you, I get that. The top 10% has something like 97% of the capital income in this country, but that's the donor class. And so it is very relevant politically. So once the donor class is hurt, the top 10% is hurt because their money's in the stock market, there'll be hell to pay. And it won't just be Pelosi, it'll be Republican senators with their phones ringing off the hook going, hey, I just lost a ton of money because this jackass, don't support him anymore. Okay, and then then all of a sudden you're gonna hear Republican senators, and Chuck Grassley has begun already from Iowa, saying, well, I mean, maybe Amash wasn't so wrong about that impeachment thing. Now, Grassley hasn't gone that far, but he is criticizing him very strongly, which is very unusual for a Republican senator. And so, all of those things you would have to plan out and think, okay, this might take 7.5 months, 2.5 weeks. What's our range? And then once it actually starts affecting real Americans and you're starting to pay $3,300 more per car, but then you're not buying it, and then the real economy starts to go into a tailspin, how much of that can we tolerate? When and what is good enough for Mexico? What actions do they have to take before we say we declare victory, right? Now, do you think any of that has been planned out?
Like Stephen Miller's all over it.
Inconceivable. He hasn't planned any of it. There's another story out today about how all of his top economic advisors, when he said he was gonna do this, basically said, no! Even the Trump guys are like, don't do this. This is a bad idea. We don't know where this ends. And Trump's like, I've never known where anything ended. So let's go forward, see what happens.
The issue from my point of view is that like the people who support Donald Trump don't look at a policy he proposes or some sort of change and then say, does that make sense based on the reality of what's going on? And let's watch it for a while and see what effect it has. And I'm going to use that to adjust how I evaluate Donald Trump. That's not how almost any of them think. They think he says Mexico is screwing us, he's being strong against Mexico. So if he raises tariffs, that is in of itself proof that tariffs needed to be raised because obviously Mexico is taking advantage of us. If he wants to send the military down to the border, well, he must have to do that because of the crisis he says is there. If he wanted to park a tank every 100 meters along the border, many Americans would just say, clearly tanks are needed at the border. And so this could decimate, not just the economy in general, but a lot of the personal finances of Trump supporters. And I don't know if that actually will get through to them.
The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.